Viewers, welcome to the Personal Injury Law Show. This is a show that talks about everything current in the law of personal injuries and of importance to you, the viewer. My name's Tony Carbone. I'm a personal injury lawyer, 30 years experience. With me tonight I've got Nuncio Tartaglia, a partner in the insurance law in a law firm. Good evening, Nunc.
Evening, Tony. Viewers, welcome.
And Don Maffia, a partner in a law firm in relation to transport accidents. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Tony. Good evening, viewers.
Tonight, viewers, we're very fortunate to have Les Twentyman, the best-known youth outreach worker and social campaigner, and also the founder of the 20th Man Fund. So please stay tuned for that.
Before we kick off though, Tony, what's in the news this week?
Well, fellas, there's been a lot in the news. Just quickly, I want to deal with this issue of concussion of footballers. Jude Bolton, when he was playing the 2012 Grand Final, said that he didn't know which way they were kicking, yet they still won the game. Pity they didn't leave him on the ground. But anyway, what's the issue here?
Yeah, look, Tony, it just brings to head the issue of concussion, and it's becoming a big prevalent issue in the AFL now, and I think that the policies around it have become a bit more stringent because, look, we haven't had anything serious happen or too serious, and I just hope the day doesn't come because
I think it's going to unfold in time to come.
Yeah.
Don, there's some suggestion that when the head hits the ground or when they suffer a trauma, that some of the brain tissues don't regenerate, they die.
Correct. What the doctors and the specialists are saying that concussion can lead to brain damage. So tissue never recover. And in Jude Bolton's case, he actually was concussed and then realised couldn't even know which way they're kicking and then ran off the ground but avoided the club doctors. So the problem there is there's got to be some responsibility on part of the players as well. I mean, it's a team effort.
But if something happened to him on that particular day and the doctors didn't get to him, and even though he tried to avoid him, the club could have been liable.
Oh, guaranteed. The beauty of it is that now player safety comes first ahead of the football club. We'll come back to this because it's a big issue. And in America, they've put aside $1 billion to cover past players. So it just goes to show you how big an issue it is. Nunc, tell us a bit about this Cranbourne wall collapse in the Cranbourne shopping centre, because one of those injured people is your client. Yeah,
Tony, look, this is one of my clients, and look, it's a sad story because there was a wall that, from the facts that we're aware of, obviously wasn't properly secured, and there's a renovation happening at the Cranbourne shopping centre, and also, there was high winds in the day from what we understand, and 5 people got injured, Tony, and, I don't know if there's any more, but it looks like there's a couple of serious injuries arising from that. So there's going to be, I think, a bit of a story to tell on that one. And Don, we're very lucky no one died in this accident because it was a, pretty substantial wall. Remember what happened in Elizabeth Street?
Yeah,
Swanson Street, sorry. Yeah.
It's just alarming that these walls keep falling over and you think construction, I mean, are we moving to a place where you're getting a cheaper construction that's resulting in these sort of things happening?
Well, it's a temporary construction, Don, so they're not
still
doing...
has to be.
Yeah,
but Tom's right there, because I've never seen so many cases of late, particularly probably the last 6 to 12 months of walls collapsing on injured people, and I've never had that many clients come to me in that regard, and I'm not sure why, if people are becoming a bit more relaxed in what they're doing, or the OHS side of it, or risk assessments, but it's not good.
And it's so preventable. I mean, it's just a risk assessment. And Don, someone going there and seeing if it's safe or not.
They're spending $113 million on the redevelopment, so we're not talking about chicken feed, are we?
That's right. It's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive.
So we'll come back to this. This is right up their alley, Don. How's this couple? They're on their motorcycle, 15 centimetre grade in the ground, bump. They've come off their bike, it's caught fire, they've died.
Yep. And
a couple of other people on the ride apparently managed to manoeuvre and miss the bump. Yep. I mean, is this happening too often on our roads?
Well, look, it is. And look, this happened on Great Alpine Road, so a very windy road. And the fact is, Tony, that Vic roads were on notice because 24 hours earlier, 24 hours before the crash,
someone else has come off the bike.
Someone came off. Yeah. They went out there, did a risk assessment and then pick up this dangerous bump. So it is alarming, and look, Vic roads in that circumstances I think are liable because they were well aware, or should have been aware.
Nunc, the families are going to get compensation, but what about someone being penalised for obviously a situation where it was pretty obvious if you looked at it closely, it was foreseeable someone could die or suffer serious injury? Yeah. No one's going to get charged there, are they?
No, look, I don't think anyone will get criminally charged, but look, I do think Vic roads, like Don said, are potentially definitely liable in this. I'm interested to see what the coroner says, and I think the preliminary investigation suggests that speed wasn't involved. So it looks like this bump was entirely the cause of the accident. Yeah. And look, they were there 2 days before, didn't identify it. I think they're in trouble.
And they can't hide behind the road maintenance act, can they?
I mean,
not when they're on notice.
No. In the civil law, the laws protect Vic roads and saying unless you had notice.
Not on this one.
Not on this one. They had notice. So notice is the fact that they were out there sometime a couple of days before, put them on notice that there was a hazard, and they should have picked it up.
Must be a big bump though to diverge like that.
Well, I guess when you're
without
on a
speed,
You don't need 15 centimetres, not
and also you're on a motorcycle. All you need is a little bump. You lose balance, you move on.
Of course.
That's the dangerous nature of a motorcycle.
We'll take up this issue in due course. What about this young girl's gone to the races during Melbourne Cup? She's had 5 glasses of wine. She can't stay awake on the job. At 3 a.m, she falls asleep. 50 chickens actually died. And the owner found out and he sacked her. And she wins her case at the
unfair dismissal.
I find that extraordinary.
I've got to say, my first reading of it, my first reaction was, I thought that's the right decision. But if you look behind it, there's a couple of things that she wasn't given the right to respond to. Those allegations put to her, and also the employer didn't have a zero alcohol policy.
Well, he didn't follow a process.
Yeah.
It was a technicality, really.
Well, when I read,
would you tolerate this? So one of your workers come to work drunk?
No, but in this case, they also said that he didn't have sufficient knowledge about her condition, so it didn't. So it must have.
Well, everyone else had knowledge of her condition.
Well, unless he inquired about it, I'm not sure what else he could do.
I would have thought it's in 30. She smothers 50 chickens. I would have thought something's not right.
What about the RSPCA? Why would you get them involved?
It's funny.
That would have been my first witness.
It's very ironical because she smothers 50 chickens and he pays her $7,500.
That's it. No, look, I reckon it's follow process and you won't have this situation occurring. And plus, don't drink on the job. It's dangerous. McKinnon, the young fellow that was spear tackled by the Melbourne Storm player, is now considering taking legal action against him and also the Melbourne Storm. But up until now, viewers, the NRL have been paying for all these medical bills, which are pretty substantial for someone that's quadriplegic. Or paraplegic.
I hope he does proceed, because I think what the NRL have done in this case has been commendable, because they've raised a lot of money to assist him in his recovery. They're paying for his medicals. I think they had a fundraising game where they raised, I think, $200-300 for him. I think this will unfortunately tarnish it, but at the same time, look, he's arguably got a case there. I'm not sure against the club, but the player, yes.
But he'll probably lose the sympathy vote, won't he, Don? They probably won't keep paying for his bills, will they?
No, they can't.
Probably not, they won't. But look, it was a spear tackle, so some element, I guess, of malice involved.
Well, assuming he wins his case, who pays?
The club will pay.
Where are they going to get the money? This is potentially a $4 million case.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe more.
Yeah, because if he's an up-and-coming player, so as you know, the endorsements are like it could be earning upwards of millions.
But the other thing too is that it's against the player, but also against the club. So how would the club be liable unless they
vicariously liable for the actions?
Vicariously, we're going to have a look at this.
Or if it's separately.
Training issues.
Yeah. See, if there's training issues, that could be separately liable as well. Yeah. So
look, viewers, we might do another episode on this. Nuns, thanks for coming on board. Viewers, stay tuned. We've got to go to a sponsors break. After the break, we've got Les Twentyman. Viewers, welcome back to the show. As I said before the break, we're very, very fortunate to have Les Twentyman on the show tonight to talk about a lot of the issues we've got in our society at the moment, especially the problems with our youth in terms of unemployment, homelessness, and also the drug problem. Don, we're very lucky to get Les on the show because he's probably one of the most experienced person to talk about this issue. Les, thanks for coming on board. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Tell us a bit about your background. You're a school teacher at some stage.
Yeah, I was a school teacher for 10 years. I was at 9 years at secondary colleges. One, Altona North, was actually called St Paul's College. Then I went down to an all-girls college for 5 years, called Mount St Joseph's Girls' School. And then my last year was at primary school in Collingwood. And that's what actually got me into youth work when a young boy in grade 3, about 9 years of age, came to ask me if he could help me. I was actually a phys ed teacher, and that stage. It was probably in another body, and the classes used to consist of 2 laps around me. But anyhow, I asked him to grab these cricket stumps, and the sleeve of his arm came down and noticed these 3 dark spots.
So he'd been abused?
It turned out to be cigarette burns.
Yes,
and
yes.
I confronted the headmistress, who was a nun, after school, and she went on to tell me a lot of these young kids out of the high-rise flats were coming from not just dysfunctional backgrounds, but really dangerous backgrounds. So I decided then...
Abusive backgrounds. Then.
Abusive, yeah,
Yes.
and, little kids telling me that, mum's got a new partner or he's got a new dad, and I'd say, he told me that last week. Oh no, there's another one. And so I then realised that I wanted to actually work with these young people. So I ended up getting a job working with teenage girls who were wards of state, and they'd been prostituting in Fitzroy Streets in Kilda, and I worked with them for about 3 years. My job was to get them out of Winlayton, which is now called Parkville.
So, Les, you were trying to protect the youth of our country, effectively.
Well, with these kids, they had been taken from the family because of terrible abuse, and my job was to try and get them back into school or get them into work. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Don, we're going to need 2 or 3 episodes to really discuss the life and times of Les Twentyman, but just tell us a bit about the 20th Man Fund. Les had a big part to play in this.
Yeah, so Les, I understand that you started fundraising to raise money for these kids or these youth in need, and then that initiated or was born 20th Man Fund.
yeah. What happened is that I was writing a column for a local paper called the 20th Man, which is like the old AFL teams, 18 on the field, 19th and 20th Man. And with my football coaching background, which I did for 17 years, and my phys ed background, the local paper asked if I could write a little column. And at the end of the year, we'd upset a few footy teams, and so we decided we'd have a barbecue to try and sort of smooth over the turbulent waters. And at the end of the night, we realised we had $500 left after we paid for all the food and drinks. And the editor of the paper, Ron Coleman, said, I will give it to the Children's Hospital. And I said, look, as a youth worker, one of the most difficult times I have is Christmas, when kids have got nowhere to go, got no presents, got no family. Let's have a Christmas party for some of the homeless kids in Sunshine. And we did. So we had about 20 homeless kids. The following year we had 60, and it was a young 7-year-old girl who got a little handbag, and she was running around picking up the wrappings off everyone else's present and whacking it into her handbag. And I said to a social worker, Frank, she's got a real thing about cleanliness. And he said, I know. He said that'd be her first ever present in her life. And if her parents knew where she was, they'd kidnap her and kill her. So that's how it basically started and went on. And from there we got some very strong corporate. I had at one stage, Channel 9 did a story with me about 2 girls and a boy living in a tip in Footscray, but still going to school doing year 11. And with the help of Smorgans, I built a homeless youth refuge in Sunshine, which is 21 years old this year and has had nearly 1,600 homeless kids go through it.
Don, with what Les is doing, and his name is probably perfect, I think.
Yes.
We don't need Les on his own. We probably need 20 people like Les, as the name says. So he's dealing with crisis accommodation. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so Les, as you were saying, so the Smorgan 20th Man Fund accommodation units are providing housing for just homeless youth. Now that's one of the programs. But Tony, there's
Youth
a lot
support
more
service,
outreach service. The list goes on. Back to school program, Redskins basketball club, which I find fascinating. So you have a basketball club playing in a league.
Yep, what had happened, there was 2 gangs that were fighting in Footscray 21 years ago, and they closed down a school after they invaded Maribyrnong Secondary College. That was on a Monday before Good Friday. On the Tuesday, the school had to get armed guards and rock wheelers. On the Wednesday, the school heard they were going to get invaded again, so they decided to make the Thursday a holiday, and it rolled into a semester break of 2 weeks. One of my youth workers worked with one gang. My other one worked with the other gang. They still work with me today. They're Richard Tregear and Jim Markowski. And on the Thursday night before the school was to recommence for the next semester, we got the 2 gang leaders together in a Footscray McDonald's, and we brokered a deal so the school could open up. But we found that one common thing both gangs liked was basketball. So we immediately started up a basketball club. We had 8 teams, and we had no ball, and we had 1 set of uniforms. And if whole 8 teams played on the one night, the kid in the last team that had seven other bodies that had his T-shirt on or singlet. Out of that, we've now got 450 kids who play every Wednesday and every Saturday. We have a leadership out of that, and we've got 8 kids in America on basketball scholarships.
Les, how are you funded? How do you get the money to conduct what you do on a daily basis, considering you've got so many different programs on the go?
Our biggest one is that we have a Club 20 where people pay $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year, and they come to 4 or 5 of our events, get tables at our gala and that's our major fundraiser. Plus we get funded by the state government for 2 of the youth workers. But we've got 8 full-time workers here in Melbourne, and we've got about 20 part-time people, and we engage with over 1,000 kids a week with basketball, leadership and our counselling services.
Viewers, we've got to go to a sponsors break. After a break, I'm going to take up the really topical issue of youth and drugs in our society and what we can do to combat it. Viewers, welcome back to the show. We're discussing all the issues that arise in society today, dealing with our youth that are unemployed, broken homes, dysfunctional families, quite a number of things. We're going to talk about the issue of drugs, but before we get on to that, Les, I think that because we've got so many unemployed youth with no direction, it's hard when you're from a broken or dysfunctional home to say, all right, he should be at school, he should be working. I think what we should do is, and Don, do you agree, national service for kids that don't have full-time work or are in full-time education?
Ideally, you want to get them back to school, but that can be a barrier in itself. But look, Prince Harry was on the news recently discussing that national service is the way to go.
Compulsory?
Compulsory.
Yeah.
So,
Les, what do you think?
Well, I'd have that in a sort of in an instant, but to me it's got to be around non-military for the first 2 years, and I'd like to run a program called a YES program, which is Youth Experiencing Success, and that can be the drama and the arts and sport and all that sort of stuff, because one of the big problems that we've got today is we've got teenage gangs, and they're getting younger, and you only have to see the news of the past weekend with these the gang out in the western suburbs called KYR, Kill Your Rivals, who've done 43 armed stick-ups. Now, these are kids that are getting kicked out of the school system because of their behaviour at school, and there's no one picking up on them.
They've got to survive somehow.
They've got to survive somehow, and that's why I've been advocating to even address the federal health cabinet up in Canberra last year, that all schools should have outreach youth workers attached to them. So when kids get expelled or suspended, the youth worker has to be with that young person and make sure they're going into some alternative thing. It could be anything, That's not happening. And I had an incident a few years ago where 2 boys were suspended from a school when they were only 13 in year 7. And 2 years later, there was a major fight at High Point where a guy had his arm taken off. When it went to the court, the magistrate asked their barrister, what's their schooling? And he said, they've been to school for 2 years. Now, the school said, we thought they went and lived in Perth, So out of the 14,200 kids suspended in schools in Victoria in 2013, you might as well say 80% of those are expelled, because schools aren't going to go out and chase the kids that are troublemakers
I
back.
appreciate that. Don, this issue of kids not at school or not working, they've got to have some direction, don't they?
Well,
the reality is, if they're not doing something, it's easy to get out there and commit crimes.
They need direction in life. They're still quite young.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be as young as 12, 13. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. So, look, definitely, and that's why we do need as youth services and involvement. And it's just not involvement from the school, but communities and also the government as well. it's a joint effort. Would you agree, Les?
Absolutely. Look, you know, most people saw SBS as Struggle Street. Now, out of the 2 hours I never saw one youth worker. I never saw any sporting activities. All it was generation after generation of dysfunctional drug users. And the only way you can sort of address that is you've got to put services in there, outreach services, to give these kids some sort of sense of purpose. And that's why our leadership, I mean, we got the Governor-General, his very first visit to Victoria was to come and visit our youth group, you know, with 40-odd kids. You know, because these kids that are in that youth group are also in our basketball. We have a Christmas party every year for the last 32 years for 400-odd kids. We run a back-to-school program where we've got over 20,000 kids back in the school, 400 onto university. So that community has been serviced.
You give them some purpose.
Exactly, in all these different ways. Now, what we saw on Mount Druitt was none of that. All it was fighting, and it was almost like a sideshow, you know, for people to get pleasure out of watching just how miserable these people's lives are. But those people are now having other kids, and they're just, you know, in Brimbank, there's 80 babies born a week. You know, 30% of those babies are born into drug-affected parenting.
Okay.
You know, in Frankston, it was on the news last night, 250 kids are born, babies are born at Frankston in a month. You know, again, another area with massive unemployment and massive youth. So what kids are thinking is that I'll have a baby, I'll get 4 or 5 grand from them, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And then it goes on drugs, and then that baby's got to be taken from them and placed into care. And so it's just this massive cycle.
Don, there's about 100,000 ice users around the country at the moment, and the Australian Crime Commission says now we've got an epidemic. As I was saying to Les before we got on air, I thought we had an epidemic back in the 80s.
Yep.
So I don't know what to call it now. It is an absolute disaster. You know what I mean?
Well, and the Crime Commission is saying that in the short to medium, it's going to continue to grow. So we haven't seen the worst of it yet, Tony. It's still growing.
And I think, based on what you're saying, is if we're smart enough, we'll spend a lot more money on your programs and probably get a lot more people like yourself and subordinate to yourself trying to deal with the youth that have got no direction and coming from these dysfunctional and broken homes.
Well, I was in jail the other day and I was addressing 60 prisoners, young prisoners in a remand centre in Ravenhall. I asked them how many of them got kicked out of school. Everyone put up their hand. How many of them went into drugs, particularly ice? Every hand went up. How many of you have ever had a job? Only 6 people have put up their hand. So there's very sort of evidence of directness of these kids. As I said, 14,200 were suspended in Victoria in 2013. They're the prison population of tomorrow. And that's what all we're doing is building more and more prisons. Instead of looking at how do we get more youth workers into support families in schools and have more alternative education.
And really, your role is almost like a paternal role, where you're the guidance that they don't have at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My youth workers in the Braybrook area, they are seen not just as youth workers, they are part of every one of those kids who play as family, you know, and that's how we don't have the problems that we saw in Mount Druitt, and that's got to be replicated right around Australia.
Les, when you first started out, obviously your message would have changed over the years with the drug use. I mean, can you explain when you started out, was drugs as rife as it was now?
The big problem was kids wanting to get home on the last train and their parents wanting them home at 10 o'clock. Hardly any drug issues. Then all of a sudden today, kids go out on the last train, come home a couple of days later, and drugs are generally all in that sort of recreation. And as for the kids that we deal with, you know, their only means to an end is to be in a gang and dealing drugs. You know, that's why we saw the Carl Williamses and Benjamin and all those sort of guys driving the flashy cars. Very short life, but it's a life that they had a little bit of grandeur about.
And Les, with the drug use at the moment, I mean, we're getting to a stage where it's ice. Effectively, one-time user could be addicted for life.
That's right. First time it happened to a very well-known sportsman whose son at a party intoxicated and bang, took this and he's now addicted. And look, in America, towns have been wiped out. They call them meth towns, you know. Everyone, you know, and this is happening in country Victoria. Victoria is the ice capital of Southeast Asia, if not the world. You know, where did we go to sleep in the world on this?
Les, time's up. I thank you for coming on board.
My pleasure.
Go to the website for the 20th Man,
Man.
and that way you'll get all the information you can get about Les's organisation and where you can donate money to this very worthy cause. Don, thanks for coming on board. We'll get you back another time, Les. Viewers, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future episodes. Go to our websites, Facebook and Twitter, and always remember to stay safe.